she hasn't foreclosed the possibility. I guess
no, she has not. She really likes a lot of the people running. She knows them well. She thought about some of them for her vice presidency. But there might be a reason that she'd be the best person not only to beat Donald Trump, but to govern after Donald Trump.
So how about that? That's a longtime advisor to Hillary Clinton. Last night with Tucker Carlson, Philip Raines saying that the door's open, a little bit at least, for a 2020 run for Hillary Clinton. And as maybe you could start this one off. I think in the commercial break, I asked the panel, did anybody think she's really going to run? I didn't see any hands go up. But is this serious, or do you think she's really thinking about it?
Look, I don't know if she's thinking about it or not. I don't think she'd be very successful if she did jump into the race. That she's just not where the zeitgeist of the Democratic Party is. It's to the left even of where it was in 2016, where an octogenarian socialist almost knocked her off. So I just don't think, and they have a lot more, options now on that stage, all of whom are basically running far to the left of where Hillary is. Even Joe Biden is conceding to that zeitgeist in the Democratic Party. So I just don't see her as a viable candidate even in the primary.
That's a very good use of zeitgeist. I don't know.
Double use of it.
Yeah, twice. I never heard that twice.
I was going to say Dickensian, like the ghost of elections past coming out. But despite what Reince said, she's looking at the field and seeing everything that we're seeing also on this side of the cameras. I mean, she's seeing a very weak field to go against President Trump. I don't think she gets in because there's only two options and neither of them are good. She'll get a bump in the polls if she announces, but then she'll have to spend every waking hour in Iowa and New Hampshire to compete. I don't think she wants to do that. I don't think she's ready to do that. Or she plays the delegate game, which without super delegates having as much power as they once did, I don't think that option's available to her.
We do stories like this all the time during presidential races, right? There's always some candidate that everybody is.
It was Tom Steyer, remember? Right. And he flopped.
Or I saw somebody tweeted yesterday. I thought it was funny. Like there's this dream that a billionaire centrist will get in. So if it's not going to be Howard Schultz, then maybe it's the CEO of Dick's Sporting Goods or it's Mike Bloomberg, right, John? So, but do you think there's another candidate out there, Hillary Clinton or someone else that we don't know about yet? Or?
So, Hillary's a powerful force in the Democratic Party. Still. She's a major, significant force. The numbers are showing several candidates doing quite well against Trump in a general election. She may be looking at that and saying, that could be me. On the other hand, she's lost twice. The Democratic Party partly blames her for the fact that Trump got elected.
I mean, if you talk to Democrats, even on camera but off camera, they mostly said she was a bad candidate, and that's why Trump won. That's what many people in that party say even today, right?
There are a lot of very compelling women candidates in the lineup for the Democratic nomination. She'd have a lot of headwinds.
So yes, that's a kind one. I don't see it happening, but it comes up over and over again. Let's talk about Joe Biden for a moment. He went out to Scranton. He loves going to Scranton, was born there, and talks about his own plans, but also had to defend his own record after going after President Trump over policies and tweets. Here's the former vice president.
Donald Trump inherited a strong economy from Barack and me. Things were beginning to really move. And just like everything else he's inherited, he's in the midst of squandering it.
Joe, I assume you disagree. So this is the idea of timing, of how the economy was doing when President Trump took over, whether he had what he had to do with it and how it's doing now. What do you say?
I just think this is an overall bad strategy for Joe Biden to be getting in. I almost think his advisors wouldn't want this. I mean, if you want
to make it about the economy.
Right, if you want to make the 2020 election about the economy and start comparing the Trump numbers versus the Obama numbers, or even worse for Joe Biden, maybe going back, looking at his record in the Senate, whether it was supporting NAFTA, the things that actually elected Donald Trump, Joe Biden has been on the wrong side. I mean, he also came out and said China's not our problem, in probably the same speech. There's no geopolitical or economic argument to even validate that, and that should concern us.
So that's an interesting point. It's going to be interesting to see how the Democratic nominee, if it's Biden especially, how they kind of handle it, John, the next election, because as we know, as we learned the last time around, it's really about states, not about an overall vote. So if you're in Pennsylvania, say, or if you go to Wisconsin, or if you go to Michigan, do the Democrats have an economic argument to make in those states, especially if the China trade war continues, or is Joe right and they should stay away from it, probably make it about personality?
Well, if you compare the Trump numbers, economic numbers, to the Obama era economic numbers, the Obama era fares very well.
Coming back out of 08.
Oh my gosh, this was
all like comparisons. Like you're coming out of a ditch. you're digging up, so you're going
But
to
you came out of a ditch.
Right.
There were days when I was Washington bureau chief during that time. You wondered whether the lights were going to come on.
But
the next,
I
next
remember.
day.
Yep.
And they came out of the ditch because of economic policies that were successful on the part of the Obama administration, and economic growth began in 2009, and job creation began.
But the polls show the president has a pretty good argument there in people's minds that the tax cuts work, the deregulation, because if you look at every issue, he struggles on a number of issues in the polls, but not on the economy relative to the other issues. That's his
right.
best issue.
You can go at this, one or two ways. You can also say that the tax cut resulted in what we have now, which is $1 trillion deficit, budget deficit, which is something that the Republicans used to rail against.
Right. Nobody's talking about that, by the way, except Mitt Romney.
Right, but if you ask
on the other hand, the economy's doing well, and that is what the voters are going to be thinking about. In Pennsylvania, Ohio, in Florida, they're going to be thinking the economy's doing well. They're going to credit the administration with the economy doing well, and that's just the facts of the matter.
You're someone who is following the markets every day, in tune to it. You're going to ask a voter in Ohio just to simply go look at your 501k, go look at your pension savings. Is it better now under President Trump, or was it better under President Obama? That's how voters will vote, regardless of what we say around tables like this.
Yeah, I think that's right. And they're not going to say relative
unemployment, which is really important in exactly those blue states, right? I mean, unemployment is at historic lows, and especially for women, actually, since 1965, we haven't had these
overall
kinds of
in the
numbers.
country, whereas in some of those states you can nitpick that. I guess that was my question. You can nitpick in some of those states and to say, some of the manufacturing numbers. Manufacturing, for example, has slowed down. The data shows it, and that's where people might be getting hurt. Trump supporters in those key states, and I wonder if there is an economic argument to be made there. Joe says no. John says maybe.
Look, who gets credit for the good economy? Is it the person who set policies in motion? Is it the guy in the office now? It's the guy in the office now.
But it's the macro. It's the macro you're saying rather than the micro. And like people's big picture, they say strong economy, we're doing pretty well, and the president
it's a good story.
Yeah, I mean, especially if the China deal does happen, if USMCA does get ratified.
Still big ifs right now.
These are big ifs, but I mean, you look at some of the other cable networks, they're struggling to find that same soybean farmer time in and time out to do the same interview every single night.
That actually is interesting. I've been out to Iowa to do those stories also, and you bring up a good point, because that in the election will be one of the stories, is that a lot of people assumed, wrongly by the way, that the farming community, just as an
polling
example,
numbers, tremendous support for President
exactly,
Trump.
would have given up on the president. And in many cases, a lot of this is anecdotal, but also I've seen it in reporting, that's not the truth.
But there's nothing.
They've been loyal, in other words.
Right. In part because of billions of dollars of taxpayer subsidies to those bailouts to those farmers. Yeah.
All right, let's wrap that up for now and go back